everybody. My name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and what I want to do is just talk about equality and mobility, a conversation that people often talk about, because regardless of what your perspective on U.S. politics is, there is something clearly wrong that's creating, essentially people are measuring things like wealth inequality, income inequality, upward and downward mobility. The question is sort of what is wrong? And a lot of times people take a look at the metric as the problem, which is, necessarily maybe the wrong approach. So, for example, if you have a high fever, right? The fever isn't the problem. The fact that you have a high temperature is a signal of other problems. Okay, so when people say, okay, we have, let's say, inequality or low mobility or whatnot, well, we can just make that metric better, that you fix a problem by taxing people and giving it to another. You may have made the metric better, but you haven't necessarily fixed the underlying structural problem. So let's talk about that for a second. Okay, and to me, the source of all this really comes down to mobility, really comes down to upward and downward mobility. And people always focus on upward mobility, people's ability to move up. But the thing is that as you limit people's ability to move up, you also make it easier or harder for people to move down. So you create those sort of structural generational inequality. So how does that happen? Well, let me point to you just a few examples of many possible examples of things that limit mobility, and oftentimes they actually come from government policy. Now again, if you fix everything that I talk about here today, you're not going to eliminate all inequality, because some inequality is natural, and that's fine. For example, the fact that a programmer makes a lot more than a lot of people is a good thing, because that incentivizes people to make the investment to learn programming, which there's demand for and we need to advance as a society and make products that we need and develop technology that we need. That's a good inequality. And those are the kind of natural inequalities that markets naturally create. Inequality based on what does the market need right now. And to incentivize people to invest in the capital, into the skills, and into the knowledge that's needed to, take those incentives. There are times when the government gets involved and imposes costs on opportunity. For example, a licensing requirement. Now, oftentimes a licensing requirement does nothing to actually determine whether someone is good at doing something. Does everyone with a driver's license know a good driver? Licensing requirements are really more about knowing regulations and knowing rules, so that way you can't later go, oh, I didn't know the rule, but at the same time it imposes a cost of being inside of an industry. Who's going to be the least able to cover those costs? Those with the least. So basically it's the poorest of families who are going to find it much harder to switch industries and pursue opportunities where they can make more money. While someone in the middle or upper class, they can afford to take the time, they can afford to take the classes to go get a license. So those opportunities will be available for them still. But those worse off are worse affected. Basically, most regulations on investments. Take a look at the world we live in now with laws like Sarbanes-Oxley. You've made it where companies don't raise money publicly anymore. So your everyday person doesn't have access to investing in companies at their early stages when you have the most wealth to gain. The only people who have access to them are rich accredited investors who buy these securities through private placements, because the regulations have made it so burdensome for companies to be public that they stay private. And only wealthy investors get to invest in those companies at early stages, giving them that rich investment opportunity and taking that away from the people who could probably benefit from that opportunity the most. So you've basically limited the opportunities to those who are worse off and preserved those opportunities for those who are well off, who can afford the extra red tape. And now they get these awesome opportunities available to them. So you've limited their downward mobility at the same time limiting the poor's upward mobility. Okay, and the third way is just the general tax and regulation on business. Now, yes, someone who's middle class, wealthy, has assets that they can go use as collateral, they can maybe borrow enough money, raise enough capital, or have enough capital to be able to deal with the taxes and regulations in starting a business. But those who are the worse off, those who could most benefit from bringing themselves up through entrepreneurship, they're the ones who are going to be least able to deal with those taxes and the fixed costs and those regulations. So at the end of the day, the more we tax, the more we regulate, the more licensing restrictions we put, the more regulations we put on investments, the more we're actually structurally creating the inequality that everyone is complaining about. because you're making it harder. You're taking away opportunity from those who need it, which leaves plenty of opportunities available for those who don't need it, because there's no competition for those opportunities because you've priced everyone else out. So you've basically created a frozen upward and downward mobility. The upward mobility for those who are worse off has been limited. At the same time, the downward mobility to those who are best off have been limited because of the way we've done our policy. So hopefully this gets you to think a little bit more critically about sort of disparities are in the economy and where they come from. Again, there's plenty of things that contribute to it. Yes, technology has an effect on it and will change where the rewards come from and who isn't rewarded. Yes, trade can have an effect as well. There's all sorts of different things that are constantly changing and things that naturally happen. So changes in technology, changes in relationships between nations, just sort of the skills that are demanded, those are natural things, and the price changes, or far as the gains and the winners and losers change, to incentivize people to make the investments in capital, skills, knowledge to better themselves by offering those premiums in other places. But there's no benefit to making it more expensive for a poor person to start a business, to go pursue a new career, and making it impossible for them to find good investments. There's no benefit there. We can address those government policies, bring back opportunity. We'll make those opportunities available to more people and make mobility upward and downward more flexible for everyone. My name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. Have a great day and enjoy.